Welcome back to episode 9 of Sibling Rivalry on my podcast India and the World. In the last episode, we talked about the Tashkent Declaration, the tragic death of Prime Minister Shastri immediately afterwards, and how the political shockwaves created public unrest in Pakistan. The public backlash permanently crippled President Ayub Khan's regime, eventually forcing him out of power. This started the next phase in the troubled India-Pakistan relationship, one that would ultimately tear Pakistan apart and give birth to Bangladesh. Given the complexities of events and circumstances within this significant phase, I will be covering it over the course of the next few episodes. Let's first look at the new personalities on both sides of the border who dominated this period. It was their egos, their fears, their passions, and their blind spots which shaped the policies and decided the fortunes of their respective countries. In the period covered up to now, the primary players from India were Jawaharlal Nehru and after his death for a very short time, Lal Bahadur Shastri. From Pakistani side, Jinnah for the 1 year he was alive after independence, and thereafter Field Marshal Ayub Khan were the main personalities. Ayub's foreign minister Bhutto appeared in a supporting role during this period. Now, new players entered the stage from both sides. In India, the formidable Mrs. Indira Gandhi had replaced Lal Bahadur Shastri after his death and was in firm control of the government. On the Pakistani side, Ayub had been replaced by another general, Yahya Khan. Bhutto's role and influence expanded significantly, and there was a third player from East Pakistan, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The fate of millions rested in the hands of these four incredibly complex personalities. Let's explore what drove them to make decisions that changed the map of the subcontinent yet again in less than 3 decades. We start with the man who held absolute power in Islamabad, General Aga Muhammad Yahya Khan. He was the protege of Ayub, who appointed him the commander-in-chief in 1966. While Yahya did not formally supersede his seniors, President Ayub Khan actively manipulated military commands to eliminate Yahya's potential rivals for the top post. If you recall, Ayub had put him in command of Grand Slam in the middle of the operation, removing General Malik just when Pakistani forces seemed poised to capture Akhnur. In a tradition that has become time-bound in Pakistan, Yahya took control of the country after actively conniving to oust his own mentor. Yahya was a stereotypical soldier, physically imposing with thick, bushy eyebrows and a deep voice. Like most Pakistani officers of his generation, he had passed out of the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun. He was known not so much for his intellect, but more for his brawn and resourcefulness, something he demonstrated very well when he escaped from a prisoner of war camp in Italy during World War II. Brian Cloughley, in his book History of Pakistan Army writes, I quote, Yahya, although not as cerebral, principled, or puritanical as the man who had appointed him commander-in-chief, was no fool, unquote. But when it came to politics, Yahya was completely out of his depth. Like Ayub and most military officers in Pakistan, he had an absolute ingrained contempt for civilian politicians. Yahya didn't have a high opinion of their intellect either and genuinely believed he could easily manipulate them. Yet, when the crisis in East Pakistan erupted, he didn't have any real political strategy. His military mind fell back on brute force, deploying West Pakistani dominated armed forces to crack down on the Bengali population. He believed that a taste of the danda, the big stick, would eventually cow the Bengali population into submission. It was, of course, a fatal, arrogant miscalculation. As the crisis deepened, Yahya's mindset grew darker. According to historical accounts, as the war in the East eventually turned against him, Yahya became increasingly ruthless. At one point, he even sent orders to the prison where his chief political rival was being held, asking preparations to hang him to start. A grave was actually dug right outside the prisoner's cell. When the prisoner asked about it, he was casually told it was just a slit trench for air raids. This was how Yahya Khan handled political opposition, with the blunt, uncompromising, and ultimately self-destructive edge of a sword. And who was that prisoner for whom the grave was dug? He was Yahya's greatest nightmare, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Mujib was the charismatic leader of the Awami League, the biggest political party of East Pakistan, which had secured a massive victory in the National Assembly elections. He was not a feudal lord or a military general like most leaders in West Pakistan. He was a middle-class Bengali politician who tapped into the deep, simmering anger of his people. For decades, East Pakistan had been economically exploited and politically marginalized by West Pakistan. The economic relationship mirrored classical colonialism, where the Eastern Wing was treated as a captive market and a resource colony for the benefit of the Western Wing. In a candid conversation with an American diplomat, Mujib once expressed his sheer frustration. He pointed out that East Pakistan earned up to 60 to 75% of Pakistan's foreign exchange, yet it received only a fraction of the nation's wealth and development. How, he asked, could Islamabad justify this? Mujib demanded sweeping provincial autonomy through his famous 6-point program. To the military junta in West Pakistan, these points were a thinly veiled blueprint for breaking up the country. The government had tried to crush him earlier, charging him with treason in the Agartala conspiracy case, which we will be talking more about in a later episode. The trial in this case turned Mujib into an instant martyr and the undisputed hero of the Bengali people. This made him a major threat to his political opponents in West Pakistan, who in any case despised him thoroughly. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto later called Mujib a congenital liar who talks at random depending on his mood. Yet, Mujib possessed a raw, unbreakable courage. He famously declared that he had no fear whatsoever of facing the bullet. He was unafraid of being jailed or hacked to pieces. Trapped by his own soaring rhetoric, Mujib had fired up his supporters to such a frenzy that he could no longer compromise without facing a revolt from his own ranks. And when he was finally thrown into solitary confinement in West Pakistan, completely cut off from the world, he became a living legend. His silence was noticed across the globe, and the world community repeatedly called for his restoration as the elected leader of his people. He became more powerful in a prison cell than he ever could have been as a free man. If Mujib was the voice of East, the West was captivated by a man of breathtaking cunning and ruthless ambition, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Italian journalist Oriana Fallaci said he was tall, stocky, a little stout for such thin legs and delicate feet, and looked like a banker who wants to get you to open an account in his bank. She said, the man is unpredictable, bizarre, carried away by whims, by strange decisions. He is undoubtedly one of the most complex leaders of our time and the only interesting one his country has produced so far. Educated at Berkeley and Oxford, Bhutto was a wealthy Sindhi aristocrat full of contradictions. He loved tailored suits, expensive cigars, and the finer things in life. Yet he founded the Pakistan People's Party on a socialist platform, promising food, clothing, and shelter to the poor. He was highly sensitive to the criticism that a rich man couldn't be a true socialist. He once complained that the hardest thing in his life wasn't dodging the assassin's bullets that had been fired at him over the years, but the fact that when you are born rich and become a socialist, nobody believes you. Bhutto was notoriously arrogant and a master of brinkmanship. He boasted about finishing his 3-year Oxford degree in just 2 years, while sneering that Indira Gandhi couldn't even finish her course in 3. His ambition was absolute. He frankly admitted that you don't go into politics just for the fun of it. You go into it to take power in your hands and keep it. When Mujib won absolute majority in the national elections, Bhutto, whose PPP only secured 25 seats in comparison to Awami League's 80, flatly refused to sit in the opposition. He famously declared, "Idhar hum, udhar tum," signaling he was perfectly willing to split the country in half just to retain power in the West. He even defended the brutal military crackdown in the East, calling the commanding general a soldier doing a soldier's job. Bhutto was a man of high drama. Years later, at the United Nations Security Council, he would famously tear up his notes and storm out of the room shouting, "I will fight for 1,000 years. I am not a rat. I have never ratted in my life." This was a man willing to burn the house down to rule the ashes. While Yahya, Mujib and Bhutto danced their deadly waltz in Pakistan, across the border in New Delhi sat a leader watching their every move with cold, calculating precision, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru and a favorite of Mahatma Gandhi, she grew up in the shadows of these two towering personalities. She saw the independence movement unfold from a ringside seat till she was old enough to become a part of it herself. Unlike her philosophical, idealistic father, Indira was a fierce pragmatist. She claimed she was not ambitious but was only interested in doing a good job, insisting that honors had never tempted her. But beneath that quiet exterior was a core of pure steel. She once said that it was a great privilege to have led a difficult life. Her lonely childhood and the hardships she had endured had trained her for crisis. She viewed international relations purely through the lens of hard national interest. When the crisis in East Pakistan erupted, creating a bloodbath that pushed millions of terrified refugees across the border into India, she did not panic. It was a humanitarian and economic nightmare that would have overwhelmed most governments. But Indira played a masterful game. She traveled the globe, methodically highlighting the humanitarian disaster to world leaders, steadily building an ironclad diplomatic justification for war. As per Oriana Fallaci, who interviewed her on several occasions, I quote, "Her personality eluded any attempt to fix it in any precise shape or color. It was too many things at once, and all in conflict amongst themselves. Many people didn't like her, and they called her arrogant, cynical, ambitious, ruthless. They accused her of ideological inconsistency, of demagoguery, of playing a double game. Many, on the other hand, liked her to the point of falling in love with her, and they called her strong, courageous, generous, brilliant. They extolled her good sense, her equilibrium, her honesty." Unquote. Among the first category of people who disliked her were President Richard Nixon and his National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger. Both actively despised her with a vengeance. In declassified White House audio tapes from the era, the disdain is shockingly evident. Kissinger is heard calling her a cold-blooded, tough customer, and in moments of deep frustration, he even used the B word to refer to her. The feeling was entirely mutual though. She disdained Nixon and refused to yield a single inch to American bullying. When she visited Washington right before the war, she sat in the Oval Office and completely controlled the conversation, gracefully bypassing Nixon's attempts to pressure her into backing down. After she left, Nixon realized he had been completely outmaneuvered. He complained bitterly to Kissinger that she had suckered them. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto hated her just as much, referring to her in a conversation with Fallaci as a mediocre woman with a mediocre intelligence. But it was this supposedly mediocre woman who outplayed them all. She wasn't intimidated by US Navy's nuclear power aircraft carrier moving into the Bay of Bengal. She wasn't intimidated by threats from China. She secured her flank by signing a strategic treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation with the Soviet Union. She waited for the Himalayan passes to fill with winter snows so China couldn't intervene. And then she waited for the perfect moment to strike, ultimately shifting the balance of power in South Asia forever. 4 leaders. A general who believed brute force could solve a political crisis, willing to dig a grave for his opponent. A populist trapped by his own rhetoric, whose silence from a prison cell became louder than bombs. An ambitious aristocrat willing to break his country in two just to rule one half of it. And an iron lady absorbing the insults of superpowers, waiting for the exact right moment to reshape the world map. As 1970 came to a close, these 4 monumental personalities were locked into a collision course. We will see how these interesting and impactful events unfolded over the next few episodes. But that's all for today. Thank you for listening. Please do join us for the next episode and do consider subscribing to the podcast. Please do share the link with your friends who may be interested. See you next time.